Hello and welcome to OUTLORE Podcast. I'm Eleanor Neale, and in today's episode, we're in Iceland in 2017, where a group of girls in their early 20s are heading out to the club. Only one of them will not make it home again. Birna Brjánsdóttir was only 20 years old, and despite almost all of her walk home being caught on CCTV footage, something still managed to happen, just off camera, just out of sight of police. In a matter of days, she would become the centre of Iceland's largest manhunt investigation ever. It's thought to be one of the safest countries in the world, but not on the night that Birna Brjánsdóttir lost her life in a truly horrific way. There aren't many places in the world safer than Iceland. They've actually had entire years with 0 murders in the whole country. Compare that to the UK. In 2017, the year that this case took place, there were 696 homicide cases, while Iceland had only 3, and one of them is the case that we'll be discussing today. 20-year-old Birna Brjánsdóttir trusted her community, and she had every reason to. For 11 years in a row, Iceland had been named the best place in the world to be a woman. But in the early hours of a cold, icy January morning, as she made her way home from a girls' night out, her trust would be betrayed. Now, before we get into this case, I do want to warn you that throughout this episode, we're going to be covering sensitive topics, including sexual assault and murder. So, as always, viewer discretion is advised. Also, you might have noticed, if you're a viewer, a YouTube viewer, that the setup has changed. In fact, it's gone back to my original setup. I'm back in London. I'm back in my London apartment. I haven't been here for I have been here. I haven't filmed here for a year. So I've had to try and zhuzh up all my equipment. So if I sound like I'm underwater, or if the technology is just not quite as professional as it normally is, please just bear with us. This episode is going to be kind of maybe teething problems. We're going to figure out if the microphone needs changing or if the setup needs changing in any way, but do bear with us. I hope it's quite nostalgic if you've been around on this channel for a while. But before we actually get into the case, I do want to thank our sponsor for making this episode of Outlaw on YouTube possible, NordVPN. It feels so full circle to do a NordVPN in this room again. We all know that a VPN is mainly used to hide your IP address and give you the ability to browse the internet across any country that you want. But Nord offers so much more than just that. There's 2 features in particular that you need to be using. NordVPN's Threat Protection Pro is one of them, which is amazing when it comes to buying stuff online. It's able to spot dodgy websites, and it detects at least 85% of all phishing sites. It catches them in action and warns you before going through with your transaction and handing over your money. You might think that you're skilled at spotting what's a scam and what's legit, but trust me, they are getting better at this. These scammers are leveling up in recent years, and with Nord's Threat Protection Pro, you never have to worry about buying stuff online ever again. And then there's the Dark Web Monitor feature that scans the internet 24/7 to prevent you from encountering any dodgy people and places online. And if for any reason you accidentally stumble into those territories, Nord will notify you so that you can stop any risks by changing your passwords and your information instantly. Myself and my team here at Outlaw, we rely on NordVPN day in and day out to keep us safe online and to eliminate the geographical parameters of the internet. And you can do the same. And you know that I've got you a little deal. You can get an exclusive NordVPN deal and 4 months extra when you click the link down below in the description of this video. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Stay safe online under the reliable protective shield of NordVPN. And now, back to the episode. The young woman at the centre of today's case is Birna Brjánsdóttir, and I apologise if I'm not getting that quite right, although I've tried my best. But this is actually the first Icelandic case that we've covered on this channel, to my knowledge. But she was 20 years old when this case took place in 2017, but she was born in the suburbs of Reykjavik, Iceland on November 28th, 1996. She seemed to have a very typical, mostly happy childhood. Her parents did divorce when she was still quite young, which I'm sure you can imagine was hard for a little girl. But despite that, Birna was always a ray of sunshine. She was friendly, outgoing, she loved to meet new people, especially English people visiting Iceland so that she could practice her English speaking skills on them. She actually made a bucket list at one point in her teenage years, like a list of goals that she wanted to complete in her life, and one of those was she wanted to meet and speak with someone from every country in the world. She was so intrigued by other cultures, and she loved to learn and travel. At one point, she actually went on a trip to the States, and she had like a cute little teen summer romance out there, and she kept seeing this boy for a little while, actually, I think, when she went back to Iceland, but they ended up ending things quite quickly because long distance and you're young and da-da-da-da. But Birna had her girlfriends back at home to get her through. Her and her group of girls were so close. When she first got her driver's license, she would borrow her dad's car and take all of her friends on aimless drives for just hours and hours on end where they would talk and laugh, sing along to the radio, just be girls together. Birna was a huge fan of music, of all music. She listened to every and any genre, which I feel like to most people would be a bit of a nothing fact, but I loved that about her when I was reading and researching this case because I relate. Like, a lot of the time people will have a genre that they hate or one genre that they specifically love, but Birna just loved all music. She appreciated it in all of its forms. She found value in every genre, in every artist. She just sounds like such a cool girl. She worked in the fashion section of the Icelandic hypermarket Hagkorp with her friend Maria, who she'd known since they first started school. They'd been friends for years and years and years. And in January of 2017, the year of this case, they were 20 years old and counting down to their girls' trip to New York in March. But in the early hours of January 14th, that trip and the rest of her life would be violently stolen from Birna. It was February 13th, January 2017, a typical pitch black, bitterly cold Nordic winter night. In January, the temperatures hover around freezing and the days are short. Like, the sun doesn't rise until like 11 a.m. They get all of about 4 or 5 hours of sunlight and then it's gone again. It's dark again. That Friday evening, Birna had headed into downtown Reykjavik to meet her friends for a night out. They started in a pub/bar situation. They were playing cards, they were drinking, they were catching up. At about midnight, they headed to a nightclub named Hurrah. Hurrah! But this nightclub was a regular spot for the girls. They'd been there plenty of times. Although tonight wasn't going to be a mega late one. At least not for Birna's friends. By 2 a.m., they were ready to leave the club. But Birna wasn't done having fun yet. The decision was made that Birna was going to stay and play out while her friends went home to bed. Now, I feel like listeners from London or New York or genuinely actually probably anywhere else in the world would be cringing at the idea of leaving your friend out alone in the club all by themselves. It feels so alien because statistically, it's not safe to do. But things are quite different in Iceland, at least before Birna's own case. That did change a lot within their community, but at least at this point in 2017, everyone trusted the community so much. Everyone trusted their country to be a safe place filled with safe people. They had insanely low crime rates to back up that kind of trust as well. It just didn't feel like a big deal to leave your mate in the club to like make some friends and go home in her own time. And the club closed around 5 a.m. Birna had danced right up until the end before setting off on the 30-minute walk back to her dad's house. She was due in for a shift at work in actually just a few hours' time after she'd left the club. A shift that she would never turn up for. Remember, she worked with one of her closest friends, Maria, and anyone who's done retail work before knows just how vital your favorite coworker is just to get through the day. If they're not in for their shift, it's the worst and most boring day of your whole entire life. Maria was lost without Birna on shift, and so she texted her a few times to see where she was, if she was coming in, but she didn't respond. Maria tried to call Birna a few times, but it went straight to voicemail. Birna's phone was off. So Maria got a little bit worried at this point, and so she called Birna's mother to ask if she knew where she was or if she was okay, if she'd heard from her. It wasn't like Birna to skip a work shift without calling in sick or letting people know. Her mum was equally shocked to hear that Birna had just completely skived work. So she tried to call her as well, and when she couldn't get hold of her either, she began ringing around the whole family, every single one of Birna's friends, to see if they knew anything. Reykjavik is a small city where people tend to know each other, or at least know of each other. It's not like so tight-knit that you know everyone, but people usually know something. But this time, no one seemed to know anything. Less than 24 hours after Birna was last seen, her mother was at the police station to report her missing. But the police weren't in a rush to start the search. They essentially gave her mother the whole, oh, well, you know, it's not uncommon for young people to go out on a wild bender and not come home for a few days. Like, they were kind of saying that Birna was out because she wanted to be out. There was nothing wrong. Like, there was no reason to be concerned. But her mum knew that that just wasn't Birna. She wasn't that kind of girl. Besides, all of her friends are accounted for, so who would she be with? The police were making out like she would probably be home soon. She would probably just bring herself home soon. But everyone just knew that that wasn't the case. Everyone had a sinking feeling in their stomach because, like I'll say again, this wasn't like Birna at all. She was such a responsible young woman. Her mother pointed out that Birna hadn't been online or updated her Facebook status since she went missing either. Birna was, according to her family and friends, pretty chronically online. If for some reason she was out on some crazy, like, out of character bender, she would at least be online. She would at least be updating her status. But it's as if Birna's existence was frozen in time when she left the club. Bear in mind, this whole entire time that she's missing, it's freezing fucking cold. If Birna is out there somewhere, she would need to be rescued fast or she would get hypothermia or even worse. Her mother felt hopeless while the police were just stalling the search for her daughter. She felt like she needed to do something, and so the only thing that she really had in her power was her social media. So Birna's mother took to her Facebook and she wrote a status that said, "Dear friends, it's not like her to just disappear like this. Please share this so we can find her." Within hours, the post had been shared thousands of times throughout Iceland. It had gone practically locally viral. The comments started rolling in, but still, no one had seen Birna. No one knew where she'd gone. No one had any information to give over. But this sudden virality of the case caught police's attention, and they were finally starting to take this case seriously. But since there was no crime scene, there was no evidence, there was no immediate danger to Birna, according to them, they technically couldn't open an official investigation. But, like, correct me if I'm wrong, is that not the whole point of launching an investigation into a missing person? To see if they are in any danger? To prevent the danger before it comes to them? Why would we wait to see that they're in danger before we do something to go out and find them? I don't know. Obviously, I'm not a police officer, would never want to be anyway, but I don't understand it. Basically, they couldn't officially open an investigation, but due to this huge social media outcry, they did begin some unofficial steps, including gathering the CCTV footage from the area that Birna would have walked home through that night. They very quickly identified her on the footage. She was clearly drunk, she was stumbling around, she bumped into someone at one point. But that's actually something important to note. There were quite a lot of people on the street to say that it was 5 a.m. and it was freezing cold. Throughout this CCTV footage, many people crossed paths with Birna. She was walking down this well-lit high street that was lined with lit-up shop signs, lit-up windows, street lamps, like street lights. street lamps. I don't think I've ever called them that a day in my life. But yeah, Birna was in this very well lit, relatively populated area to say that it was 5 a.m. She stopped off along the way to grab a falafel pitta, so she spoke to whoever served her that as well. But then at 5:25 a.m., she rounds a corner and vanishes completely. She's not picked up on any further CCTV cameras, no more footage at all. Not even the cameras further down that street that she just turned onto. Police were baffled. They check every connecting camera in the area, but she is literally not seen ever again on this security footage. The last time that her phone had connected to a cell tower before it had stopped pinging altogether, before it was shut off or it ran out of charge, that was 6 miles south of this spot that she had last been seen on CCTV. So how had Birna, or at least her phone, gotten so far away without being seen on CCTV anymore, like at all? So police go back to this footage and they really analyse absolutely every element. And that was when they noticed a car. A red Kia Rio was stopped right at the intersection, right at that place where Birna turned the corner. And then it sets off again at the exact moment that Birna rounded that corner. If Birna had gotten into that car or was forced into that car, it wasn't caught on the CCTV footage. That was a blind spot to the security cameras. But I have to say, it's like almost the only explanation at this point. Like, I feel like there's no other way to explain that she does just vanish from all CCTV footage, yet this car kind of rounds the corner at the same time as her. This CCTV footage of the red Kia Rio was so dark and so grainy that the police couldn't make out who was in the car, how many people were in the car, if it was a man or a woman. The license plate, the number plate was illegible. The only thing that police could do was appeal to the public to see if anyone knew of any red Kia Rios in the area at the time. But they got a grand total of 0 calls. For no one to have any information about this car was really strange and actually kind of suspicious. It made the police wonder, was this person being protected? Or maybe no one recognized it because the car and the driver weren't from Iceland at all. By now, an official investigation had been launched into Birna's disappearance. Police realized how serious and, frankly, suspicious this was, and they knew that the driver of that car was their only real person of interest. They didn't know right now if it was a suspect that was driving the car or just the last person to have seen Birna, but either way, they had to track down this car and its driver immediately, some way. There were only, there were 126 red Kia Rios in the whole of Iceland. Iceland's not a huge country, but 126 different cars is a lot to go around and check. Police decided that that was the only way that they were actually going to get any information about a red Kia Rio, is if they track down every single owner of one and go and speak to them all in person. Obviously, that was going to take a long time. But in the meantime, as that operation was underway, more developments unfolded. Someone had finally called the tip line about the red Kia Rio. You know, I said that there were 0 responses. This was their first. Someone called up to say that they had spotted a red Kia Rio just before 6 a.m. that same morning that Birna disappeared. Remember, she was last seen on CCTV footage at 5:25. So chances are, could be the same exact red Kia Rio. And the location that this tip came in from, where this person had spotted the car, was a bit further out from where her phone was switched off. So police are confident now that this car and Birna's disappearance are definitely connected. The car was heading in the direction of Hafnarfjörður Harbour. Yeah, I know, a minute for the pronunciation. I'm sorry, it was probably horrific, but I've literally practiced it like 7 times, and I'm quite proud of it. Hafnarfjörður Harbour. So it's heading to a harbour. In the coming days, searchers were concentrated in that area around that harbour, and a very odd discovery was made. 2 brothers spotted a pair of boots abandoned in a fenced-off area. They were half buried in the fresh snowfall, but when they pulled them out, They looked like the boots that Birna had gone missing in. Just to make sure, the brothers had to Google what Doc Martens looked like. They compared them against a picture, but it was legit. These boots turned out to be Birna's exact boots. So where was she? Within an hour, the area was crawling with police and forensic teams. Divers plunged into the freezing waters. Drones were scanning the shorelines, all searching. But there was no other sign of Birna in the area whatsoever. But the same couldn't be said for the red Kia Rio. CCTV around the harbour was pulled, and now police had a huge lead. The car was seen pulling into the harbour and parking up at around 6:10 a.m, which is almost an hour after Birna was last seen on CCTV. When the car parks up, a young man steps out from the passenger side and talks to the driver for a second. So confirmed there were at least 2 men in this car. The guy that got out stumbled, clearly very drunk, onto a fishing boat that was docked nearby, and he went to bed for the night while the car drove off again out of the harbour. Birna's Doc Martens were found just 300 metres from where that boat was docked, that the man from the Kia Rio went and got onto. But finally, with this harbour CCTV footage, the image was clear enough to make out the number plate. Now they could finally search up this one specific car, and they found that it was registered as a rental car. So they got in touch with the rental company who had all of the records, and they gave police the name of the man that had booked out that red Kia Rio. They finally had their guy. Thomas Molle Olsen was a 25-year-old Greenland native in Iceland at the time, working as a crew member on board the Polar Nanook, which was a fishing boat. The fishing boat from the CCTV footage of Hafnarfjörður harbour. Thomas had returned the rental car, the red Kia Rio, around lunchtime on the day that Birna disappeared, so about 7 hours after she disappeared. It had been rented out to another family practically straight away. As soon as they got the damn car in, they sent it back out again, although this family that it was rented out to had complained of a very strong chemical smell coming from the back seat. Real true crime nerds know that that only ever means one thing: that it's been bleached, it's been scrubbed, it's been disinfected to eradicate as much forensic evidence as possible. But there are some things that cleaning products can't erase. Police seized the car and performed an in-depth analysis, and they exposed what Thomas Olsen was trying to hide. There were traces of blood found on the back seat. Now, they couldn't confirm immediately whether or not this blood was a match to Birna, their missing girl. Iceland's crime rate being so low is obviously a great thing, but that also means that they don't have very advanced forensic facilities over there because it's so rare that they would need them. Whenever they do need them, or at least in 2017 at the time of this case, they would send samples to Sweden for testing. So off they sent the blood sample and Birna's DNA for testing, but results would take a few days to come through. In the meantime, police had managed to identify the other man that was also in the red Kia Rio that night. They believed that Thomas Molle Olsen was the one driving it, and the drunk guy that stumbled out and onto the ship was one of his fisherman co-workers. This guy was a couple of years older, 27. His name was Nikolai Olsen, which, no relation to Thomas. Olsen is just apparently a really common surname out there. Both of them were from Greenland, and they usually worked around Greenland. And frustratingly, the Polar Nanook, the boat that they were both working on, had left within hours of Birna's disappearance. So police couldn't go down there and speak to them straight away. They couldn't do anything. So now they're like, well, how the hell do we track down a boat in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean? Like, the only thing that police in Iceland could really do was inform the authorities over in Greenland to be on the lookout for the boat and the men returning. All police teams involved wanted it to be as discreet as possible, because actually there was more than even just Iceland and Greenland. There was like the Danish police involved, like everyone around there was getting involved. And they all wanted to be as discreet as possible because just in case the Olsens or anyone on the boat tried to get rid of evidence or tried to sail elsewhere to escape, they didn't want to risk them knowing that police were onto them. But an Icelandic journalist blew their cover anyway and messaged Thomas Möller Olsen on Facebook trying to get their own private intel that they could post about. I'm not entirely sure what this message said. I'm guessing it alluded to a police investigation. And according to his crewmates on board, Thomas went pale when he got this message. He was anxious, he was panicked, he ran straight to the ship's captain to show him this message and get his advice. He was hysterical, but the captain told him not to worry. If he hasn't done anything wrong, then nothing bad's gonna happen. The police aren't gonna come after you. Well, the fact that that did absolutely nothing to calm his nerves spoke volumes. Everyone on the ship could tell that something had happened. They Googled the name of their own ship. I assume the message from the journalist alluded to that too. And they all realized that their boat was all over the news, connected to the disappearance of a missing young woman in Iceland. The captain of that boat knew that he had to take Thomas Möller Olsen back to Iceland to speak with the police, whether that was to clear his name or to hand him in. But the captain, just like all of the police, he didn't want to freak Thomas out or risk anything, risk him bloody jumping overboard or whatever. So the captain told the whole crew that something was actually wrong with the engine and they needed to make a quick U-turn and go and fix it back in Iceland. He also decided to cut off the ship's Wi-Fi so that Thomas and Nikolai, both Olsens, couldn't receive any more messages from journalists. They couldn't check in on the news articles and stuff. As the ship headed back to the harbour that it fled from, they had no idea that the police were actually right there waiting for him. They were a couple of steps ahead, actually. They'd even called in the big guns. Waiting alongside the police were Iceland's elite counter-terror unit called the Viking Squad. They actually have an Icelandic name. It's Vikingasveitin. I just think the concept of Iceland having the Viking Squad, where other countries have things like the SAS or the Navy SEALs, they have the Viking Squad. That sounds so cool. And for those people that know of the Viking Squad, their reputation speaks for itself. So at this point in the case, it was 4 days after Birna disappeared. And in the early hours of Wednesday, the 18th of January, the Viking Squad flew out to intercept the Polar Nanok before it had even arrived at the harbour. By now, police had actually managed to geographically track the boat, and even though it did appear to be making its way back to Iceland, obviously thanks to the captain and a little white lie that he told the whole crew, but police had no way of guaranteeing that that was what the boat was trying to do. At this point, they didn't know that they had an ally on board in the form of the captain. There was every chance that the Polar Nanok was going to come towards the harbour, see all the police waiting there for them, and then just turn around and bloody sail off somewhere else. So the decision was made for the Viking Squad to go and intercept the boat out on the ocean. The weather was absolutely brutal that morning as 6 members of the Viking Squad boarded and took control of the ship. Thomas and Nikolai were locked in their cabins while the ship headed back to Iceland. 12 hours later, they were back in the harbour. Thomas and Nikolai were handcuffed and taken into custody immediately, but there was still no sign of Birna anywhere. Police did, however, discover her driver's licence cut up into little pieces and thrown in the trash on board the ship. Not only is that entirely incriminating, but also just the dumbest thing I think I've ever heard in a true crime case ever. You are literally on a ship in the middle of the ocean and you chose to throw evidence in the bin on board. Like, I am very much against littering in the ocean. I'll be the first person to tell you off for doing that. But you have to be a moron to choose the bin in that situation when you have the vast blue surrounding you. That is going to swallow up evidence and never spit it back out again, but you chose the bin. But hey, it's actually a really good thing for the investigation that one or both of these men were morons. It was just more evidence to prove that they had done something to Birna. Even though her driver's license was on board, police don't believe that she herself ever actually stepped foot on the Polar Nanok. I mean, we didn't see her at all on the CCTV footage. In fact, the car was followed on CCTV the whole way to the harbour, and not once did it stop and let a redhead girl out. So that must mean that if Birna was in the car, then she was inside it in that CCTV footage while Nikolai was being dropped off. So if that means that Birna and Thomas drove off together away from the harbour, then he must have brought her driver's license back with him. Clearly not to keep because he threw it in the bin, but maybe to prevent her body from being identified if it was found. Right now, they had no idea if Birna was alive or if it was already too late. But as time was going on and more developments unfolded, it wasn't looking good. But police had both of their suspects in custody, both of the Olsen men. And by now, they'd even noticed that Thomas had healing scratches all over his chest and shoulders. Police were about to give both men the 3rd degree until they found out what happened to Birna Brjánsdóttir. Both of these men swore that they had no idea who she was, they had nothing to do with it, etc., etc. But trying to get a straight story out of the men was more than difficult. Nikolai just seemed genuinely confused. He said that he was absolutely bladdered drunk that night, like total blackout, barely remembers anything at all. Awfully convenient, right? Thomas, on the other hand, the driver of the red Kia Rio, seemed slightly more composed, slightly more confident in his answers, and although he admits that he was also drunk, so that means drunk driving as well, might I add, he still insists that he remembers the whole night. The way that the evening seems to have started for the men that night is that Nikolai was out drinking on his own in an English pub just off of the main street, the very street that Birna would be walking down to get home later. Nikolai claimed that he knew the bartender at this pub, so whenever he was in Iceland on work, he would pop in to go and see this guy. So he went first, he was like chatting and catching up with his mate, and then he told Thomas to come and meet him there, which he did around midnight. According to the bartender, he confirmed that Nikolai was plastered already. Like by the time that Thomas Möller Olsen even got there, Nikolai was fucking 2 sheets to the wind. This man was so drunk. But Thomas himself seemed pretty sober. The bartender said that he only served him 1 pint and 1 shot, and that was all he had the whole time that he was in there. Obviously, that bartender couldn't account for any other alcohol he'd had that night, but he seemed coherent and he wasn't drinking that much in his establishment. The bartender said that Nikolai, the 2 men obviously had this 1 drink together, but Nikolai got so drunk that he fell asleep in the pub, and Thomas just left him there for a few hours. Later on, as the pub closed in the early hours of the morning, he came back in the red Kia Rio to pick up Nikolai and take him back to the ship to bed. Nikolai says that when he got in this car, bear in mind how drunk he is, he said that there was at least 1 woman in the back seat. Or it could have even been 2. He was too drunk to even tell, much less remember. He was so drunk that he said he didn't even speak to the woman or women in the back seat. And then eventually they got to the harbour and he just stumbled out and that was it. That was like the whole interaction as far as Nikolai's story was concerned. Thomas says that from that point, he drove a little bit further back in the harbour and he parked up to climb into the back seat and start getting with the women or woman. It's unclear how many women Thomas claims that there was. I think he claims that there was 2, and he actually said that one of them was Birna, and he was kissing her in the back of his car at the harbour. He said all this to the police. He said that this went on for about an hour, that they were in the back of his car, before he eventually drove both of these women out to a roundabout and just dropped them off there. Because they'd asked for that, apparently. Weird. I can't imagine anyone asking to be dropped off at a roundabout at like 6:30 to 7. Thomas then said that he slept in the rental car for the next 4 hours instead of going back to bed on the boat. He dropped the rental car off and then made his way back to the boat just before it set off to go back to Greenland. Only police know that none of that is true because there were way more miles on the meter of that car than what his story accounts for. There was some driving around that he is not telling police about. Thomas Möller Olsen was still trying to keep secrets from the police, but soon that wouldn't be an option anymore. On the morning of Saturday, January 21st, a week after Birna's disappearance, the the police launched the biggest search operation in Iceland's history. There were over 1,000 people, in fact, way over 1,000 people out searching. Over 800 of those were just pure volunteers, people from all over Iceland that were united in their grief and their humanity. This wasn't just about one missing person, it was about the whole country's sense of safety. The belief that nothing bad could happen here had cracked, and people felt betrayed. For 2 days straight, volunteers and police searched a massive area of 7,000 kilometers. Every terrain, from lava fields to snowy hills and frozen lakes. Eventually, the search came to an end on the 22nd of January when a Coast Guard helicopter flying over a black sand beach spotted something near the water's edge. He called for a team on the ground to go and check it out, and it was the discovery that everyone had been dreading. Birna had been found, but she had been dead this whole time. She was completely naked, her dead body seemingly having washed up on this shore. At first, police thought that she could have drowned or been drowned by someone, but then they saw the marks on her face and on her neck. She had been beaten. She had been strangled. There were strangulation marks around her, although there was no evidence of sexual assault discovered on her body. But the fact that she was completely naked is very telling. When her body was recovered and an autopsy was performed, the horrifying discovery was made that Birna was in fact alive when she was thrown in the sea. She had drowned, after all. Police had assumed that they were wrong when they saw the strangulation marks on her neck and the beatings to her head. But that had happened to Birna while she was still alive, before she was put into the water and drowned. She went through an ordeal with her attacker. This probably explains the scratches on Thomas Olsen's chest, right? For weeks, Birna's mother couldn't bring herself to hear the details of what had happened to her daughter, but the rest of Iceland were vocal with their grief and with their anger. Memorials were held not only in Iceland, but in Greenland, in Denmark, in Reykjavik. Thousands of people came together to honor her memory, walking down that same street that she walked down, leaving candles, leaving flowers, remembering her for the beautiful woman that she was. Her funeral took place on February 3rd, 2017, in Iceland's largest church, and it was attended by over 2,000 people, including the president and the prime minister. Birna's case united people in a way that is rarely seen, and that actually brings me to today's charity spotlight. Women of Multicultural Ethnicity Network, or W.O.M.E.N for short, do amazing work advocating for women of foreign origin living in Iceland. Their mission is to bring about true equality for these women by addressing issues like gender-based violence, employment, and social challenges. It's run entirely by volunteers, a group of passionate, elected women who are deeply committed to supporting foreign women in Iceland. They work tirelessly to make sure that every voice is heard and every woman has the support that she needs. If you're living in Iceland, you can become a member of this amazing organisation, or if you're not, but you want to help out, please consider donating to support the important work that they're doing. The link will be down below in the description of this episode, along with our usual link tree that has a huge pile of resources in all kinds of categories for loads of different countries. Whether you need a helpline, an organisation, whether you want to donate, whether you want to volunteer, you can find everything in the description of this episode. Now, back to the case. There would only be one of the two Olsens going to trial. Police had concluded that there simply wasn't enough evidence to charge Nikolai with anything at all. Plus, he was seen getting onto the boat on the CCTV footage while Thomas seemingly drove away with Birna. So Thomas Moller Olsen would be going to trial in August 2017. Not only was he charged with murder, but also drug smuggling. This is a bit mad, actually. When police searched the Polar Nanok, they found 23 kilograms of hash, which was valued, like street value, at like 1.4 million pounds. They were smuggling millions of pounds of drugs as well, and he gets caught for this. I do wonder how police knew for sure that it was just Thomas smuggling it. Like, imagine the whole ship were in on it, but now they all just turn against Thomas because they can. But, you know, the drugs are quite irrelevant to this. For his murder charge, the mountain of evidence against him was huge. By now, his DNA had been found on the laces of her boots, his fingerprints had been found on the ripped-up driver's license, the blood testing had come back from Sweden, and it was confirmed that that was Birna Brjánsdóttir's blood in his rental car. So police believe, based on all of this evidence, that he attacked her inside the car. That was probably when he struck her in the head. You know, she had that injury to her head. He probably even strangled her there in the back of the car before eventually taking her to the ocean and dumping her in there. What we don't know is if she was passed out at the time and that's how she drowned, or even worse, if he held her under to make sure that she drowned. Regardless, he left Birna for dead in the water and hopped back into his rental car. And then he drove to the store, actually. This was evidence that they found a little bit later on. He drove to a store, purchased a dry set of clothes, because possibly he was in the water with her. He purchased bin bags and disinfectant. And then he wasted no time cleaning out the back seat, you know, the blood, the DNA, in the parking lot of the store with so many witnesses around. The store that he had just gone and bought cleaning supplies in, he's now cleaning the car in the car park. The CCTV caught everything. And then he returned the car and went back to the boat. And then they went off to Greenland. But even with all of this evidence against him, Thomas Möller Olsen still refused to admit what he'd done. He kept sticking to his story that he had dropped Birna off at a roundabout with this other random woman. But why would you need to scrub blood out of the back of your car if all you did was drop her off at a roundabout? Make it make sense. But the part that still actually doesn't make sense is why Birna would get into his car that night and why he would kill her. Strangulation is a very intimate form of violence. It's about control, about fear, about domination. For Thomas to strangle Birna, a complete stranger to him, is really weird, among other things. But I wonder if he had tried to sexually assault Birna. Even though the autopsy reported that there was no evidence of sexual assault on her body, it doesn't necessarily mean that there was none, or that there was no attempt to, at least. Her body, after all, was found in the water, so surely there's a chance that any evidence of sexual assault could have been washed away. I personally, even if the evidence kind of says otherwise, I personally believe that there was more than likely a sexual element to this, whether he had genuinely assaulted her or just tried to, and then she fought back, and that was when he started to strangle her in the back of the car. I'm not sure. After all, Thomas did admit to climbing into the back of the car and kissing a girl that he claims was Birna. We don't know if she consented to that. That's not something that would show up in an autopsy. My mind does just keep going back to those scratches all over his chest as well when they first arrested him. That is surely evidence that she fought him off. He'd hit her over the head as well. It starts to feel like a rather impulsive attack when you piece it all together. Like, he doesn't really know what move to use. I think there's a chance that she had rejected him or stood up for herself in the back of that car and he had just lost control. A hit to the ego like that would explain such an intimate MO like strangulation as well. And then, so maybe he did strangle her and then maybe she passed out. Maybe he thought that he had killed her and so he panicked and tried to get rid of the body by throwing it in the ocean. And that was when she actually died, when she drowned. Obviously, the evidence itself can't say that that is the exact sequence of events. That's just kind of a theory that seems most likely from looking at all of this evidence. But the point is, there is so much evidence to say that Thomas Möller Olsen did something, yet he pled not guilty to the murder. What the fuck? Like, his DNA is on her boots. Her blood is in your rental car. Yet he pled not guilty to the murder, but pled guilty to the drug smuggling right off the bat, but not the murder. And then, in one last-ditch attempt to save his ass, he changed his story completely, and it's actually laughable how shit it is. He said that Birna had randomly climbed into his car that night while he was driving. Insane, I know, also near impossible to do, but it gets better. He said that when they got to the harbour, he got out to pee, and while he was gone, while his back was turned, Nikolai supposedly jumped in the car and drove off with Birna, and then came back later without her. He literally tried to put it all on his insanely drunk co-worker fisherman friend. Like, who do you actually think is going to believe all that when they literally had the CCTV footage playing in the courtroom, you donkey? Imagine lying and then someone goes, well, here's literal footage of you not doing that. If he had gotten out to pee, there would be footage of him getting out to pee. He didn't get out of that car at the harbour. He is lying. Of course, in the end, Thomas Möller Olsen was found guilty of murder and drug possession. He was sentenced to 19 years in prison and was ordered to pay Birna's parents 7 million kroner, which is about 66,000 US dollars, about 50,000 Great British pounds. Thomas did actually try to appeal this conviction, but it was upheld. He was essentially laughed out of the courtroom. He was denied any further appeals beyond that as well. And right now, he is serving the rest of his sentence in a high-security facility in Denmark, since he had a Danish passport. And apparently, I didn't know this, Iceland tend to deport their very serious criminals. So he's in Denmark. He is due to be out of prison in 2036, when he'll be around 44 years old, which is a scary thought. Just a reminder before we end this episode that the W.O.M.E.N charity and our link tree are down below in the description if you would like to donate, if you need to find any help, any helplines, any organizations, if you have been triggered by this episode. All the resources that I think you could possibly need are down below in the description. But also, if you notice that there are any missing or if there are any that you would like us to add, please let us know in the comments of this episode. We always want to improve you guys' experience of these episodes as well, and if there's any way in which we can help you to do that, we would love to. That all sounded a bit salesy, but like, you know, we love you and we just want to be there for you. But thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Outlaw Podcast, and also thank you so much to NordVPN for sponsoring. Remember, you can get that exclusive deal plus 4 months extra when you click the link down below in the description. It's risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, please leave us a thumbs up, please subscribe. Also, hit the notification bell. I've been getting so many comments from you guys lately being like, oh my god, YouTube didn't give me the notification for this. So maybe even like unclick it and re-click it. Turn it off and back on again. That's what I do with absolutely every kind of technology. Probably why this setup is so janky. Again, just a reminder to leave your comments down below on things that we could improve about this setup, because I think this could be a permanent addition. But hey, whatever. I was trying to do the outro, wasn't I? Leave a comment, leave a like. I love you so much. If you're listening on a podcast platform, please rate us 5 stars. And again, leave us a comment. We love reading the comments on the podcast platforms. And with all that being said, I will see you in the next episode. Bye!